Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Fluff and Crunch, our first for 2024. In today's episode, Chris and I are going to discuss and maybe argue a little bit about what we think are the top five 2D20 based RPGs that are out there now, and some things that you could do with them or how you could get connected with them, why you'd want to get connected with them if you're not familiar with some of these properties. As always, thank you for listening. Like and subscribe, whether you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube. Also, make sure to check the show notes for the link to our Discord. Join our friendly Discord, get involved in the discussion. We would love that. Well, hello, Chris. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Today, we are going to talk about our top five 2D20 properties. And we had originally planned to harmonize to have one single list, but actually our lists that we just shared with one another are quite different. So we decided that an argument, a debate, might be a little more lively. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk today about what we believe each of us are top five 2D20 RPGs, whether they're in print or not, and why. But before we do that, have you done any gaming in the last couple of days or anything else interesting happened in life in the last few days?
What did I play? Well, so I did two.
I don't know. I
didn't
asked
play any
you.
role playing. Did board gaming. Fridays. At some point last week, Scott and Brian came over and we carried on playing Massive Darkness 2, which is the board game thing that we're playing. And then I went to some friends on Saturday night, and we played, I don't know, some board games. Obviously wasn't that memorable because I can't remember what board games we played.
But not memorably bad. So
no, they were just
right.
board games, nothing special. And then I have done what? Oh, but I've actually done some role playing writing because I wrote an adventure which ended up being 5 pages. So that's quite large. Actually.
Excellent.
So yeah, that's good. How about you?
We played a one-off using my Eris rules, but for a modern day story. We had originally thought that we were going to be one player down, so I said, all right, we'll just do this one-off. And then as it turned out, we weren't one player down, and I wasn't prepared for Kingmaker, so we ran the one-off anyway. And actually, it doesn't surprise me because its bones are the same as Achtung Cthulhu, as the same as Conan. It worked really well. The Eris system worked really well for a supernatural investigative story that took place in 1987. Good stuff. And then we're off this coming weekend because I'm going to be out of town for work. Yeah. And actually, hey, here's something noteworthy. Not that happened, but is the case with this episode. This is our first episode for 2024.
This will be our first episode in 2024.
Wahoo! So we have 13 2D20 games. And we're going to rank them. We're going to rank them we're going to pick our top 5 each. And like I said, I thought that you and I would be much more on the same page, but we are not. So that's okay.
I think we are mostly on the same. We have a lot of the same in things in our top 5.
We do.
Someone might. I'll do a quick point why some of them are missing. Straight away, I couldn't include. I wouldn't have included.
Wait, don't ruin it.
But all right, there are certain ones I didn't include because I haven't played them or really looked at them enough to have considered. So, for example, Devil's Run. Also, I didn't count Devil's Run because it wasn't the official one, but I own the book, but I've never played it or anything, so right. I wouldn't have included that.
Yeah, all of these are ones that I have played or I have done like sample solo played with because I was planning on GMing it. So all of them I know, and I know the properties well enough. So why don't you give us your number 5?
Okay, my number 5 is Achtung Cthulhu.
Okay. Why?
Mostly not because there is anything wrong with it. Everything else above Achtung Cthulhu on the list, I have played more. It's as simple as that. Pretty much everything else that is not in my top 5 is because I haven't played it. I've read it, and some of them I think are good, and some I think are bad. But I haven't. Achtung Cthulhu, I've actually only run for that Christmas one I did a year ago, and that's it.
Okay.
And I keep thinking I'll play it more. I like the idea of it. I think the setting's very good. It's possibly the best version of the system. I just haven't played it. So I think to put it any higher, I'd have to have played it a load more. I just haven't.
So I get that. So to sign off on it, you would want to have had more experience with it so that you'd be vouching for it. I like that. Okay. Want to hear my number 5?
Yes.
Fallout. And I put Fallout as number 5, actually primarily for the same reason that you just put Achtung Cthulhu there. It is the one that I have played with the least. Although everything that I've seen from it in the core book to the starter set, I think it represents the IP really, really well. And it's interesting because it employs some of the crunchier bits or crunchier feel of like Conan or Infinity when it comes to all the gear, all the equipment.
Yes.
And it also adds an interesting spin on the system as the only system, the only 2D20 iteration that has levels, which I think is fascinating. And so I think it does everything that I've seen. And I don't play Fallout now. I played Fallout when it was on Windows in like the late 90s. But seriously. But I'm familiar with the story and the setting. And I think it does a really good job of, within the books, representing the feel and the vibe, and also the system tweaks. I think it models the feel of the property really well. I don't anticipate that I would find otherwise, but like you with Achtung Cthulhu, it's just a lack of experience. Now the rest of these, my other four, I have played at least several times, and some a lot, and run rather. So much more deep experience coming.
Yeah, similar for me. That's why. So this is I'm still surprised that anyway.
What's your number 4?
My number 4 is Star Trek. Mostly, I guess a similar thing. I have played it more than I've played Achtung Cthulhu. I've run a few. I've done the Captain's Log with you. Mm-hmm. I own a lot of books. If I did it on which books I've gone and bought more that weren't on a Kickstarter,
it would be that.
It would be Star Trek, but that's because virtually all the other ones I own a lot of, whether either Kickstarters or they don't have a lot of books. So Star Trek does have an unfair advantage. So I can't put it up the ranking on the basis that I own a lot of books for it, because it's the only one with separate books.
What are the merits, in your view, what are the merits of Star Trek Adventures and as a 2D20 game?
I think that the first thing I guess is the same thing I could say for all of the others. It does the setting really well. This is the annoying thing when people are like, I tried 2D20 and I bounced off the system. Right. But every single version of 2D20 role-playing games does a really good job of meeting the setting requirements. And Star Trek does that really well, partly because you have 6 stats, and then you have the 6 disciplines.
Yeah,
genius. And then it didn't go loads into massive, extra complicated combat rules, because it's not. The ship combat does. It's very complicated ship combat, but the non-ship combat's very straightforward.
Yeah.
And then you have the scientific method rules, which is amazing.
Yeah. I agree.
I think that's a really brilliant mini system. And the simple reason why, if I think it's so good, I'm not a massive Star Trek fan. I like Star Trek and I watch Star Trek when it's on, but I don't then go away and talk about it loads, and I don't obsess about it, and I do not have any Star Trek merchandise at all. Whereas I have merchandise for loads of others. I have no Star Trek merchandise because I watch it and I enjoy it, and then that's the end of it.
You're not that deep into it.
Yeah. And I haven't actually played, despite having all this stuff, there is other things that I have played a bit more or just enjoyed a lot more. I think Star Trek is very, very good. And I think if you really like Star Trek, I can imagine you playing nothing but this role-playing game.
Absolutely. And it seems to me based on that's kind of silly, based on online, in which, you always put an asterisk on because half of it could be, overrepresented or BS. But it does seem like there are a lot of folks out there who that's their game. Like for a niche audience, Star Trek Adventures is their D&D.
Yeah. And I think that's fine because D&D,
totally.
We kind of ridicule people who only play D. And some of those might be because they haven't tried anything else or don't realize. Right. Now, if you play Star Trek Adventures, chances are you have tried other stuff. But there is enough different things that I think you can play a lot of Star Trek. The only thing I think they're missing the thing on, and I don't think it's really their fault, is I think it'd be cool if you could play some of the other species. But if you actually look at all the properties, you think, well, actually it's very difficult because we've only ever seen the Romulans really as the bad guys.
But they have the stats. They have the stats for however someone wants to wrap other species into their game. They have it there.
I think it'd be cool if they could look at some other ways of playing Star Trek. So I feel like it's great if you want to play Starfleet and if you wanted to do other stuff, do it. But they did do the Klingon book, and that was really cool. And there's so many different time period things.
I'll
and now
hit Star
ways
Trek,
of doing
and I'll add some to it here in a moment.
What's your 4 then?
Dune. Now, I have run Dune several times. I've run Dune as one-shots several times. And I put Dune here because I think that what they've done with the system, dispensing with challenge dice, running everything off 20s, highly narrative, very abstract action in a lot of ways, I think is really ambitious. And I will hat tip to Modifius to trying to do something really, call it out there with their system to meet a property that has some very unique, like a very unique feel to it. Yes, it's science fiction. However, it's its own thing. And I think that they, as I said, I think it was really ambitious and gutsy of them to do that. I think that production value and the way that the books convey the look and the feel and the vibe of Dune and Arrakis and the houses, I think is outstanding. You open those books, you page through them, you read them, and you feel gritty and dry. For such a setting that is so steeped in a very specific vibe, the books have to convey it. You have to feel like it's like, Vampire the Masquerade second edition. Like you read that and it just sucked you right in, and it conveyed the sense of the world. Cyberpunk 2020 books did an excellent job of that. Now, my caveat with Dune is that I think it is actually it's a hard game to run. I think that it takes a novice GM, I think, would struggle. And I think that, and this is in no way a pejorative, but people who are very conventional gamers will have a very hard time with how abstract it is. Like this whole idea of moving or using an asset it's so narrative. You don't play your character so much as you use your character, but that's not like a meta wargaming kind of approach. It is. I appreciate, like I said, the ambition that they've done with Dune, that they showed with Dune, and I think that it's successful. However, it definitely takes an experienced GM and players who buy in and take the time to not just like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with the core mechanic, tell me what dice to roll, that kind of thing. You're not going to be successful with that. But I actually don't know if Dune is like my thing, with the limited time I have to play and run games, more like run games. I don't have a place in my life to like put Dune on an active shelf. So I don't know if that'll ever happen. And if I did, I don't know if I would, just because of it. I don't know if I'm that interested in the property, but I recognize something. Like I think it's just, like I said, it's well done. It's ambitious. The rules tweaks are really interesting, from the incredibly minute, like a 1-to-1 skirmish to like planetary battles and corporate espionage and things like that the rules are meant to handle all of those things. I think is really interesting. So I think it deserves to be there. And if you're that kind of GM and player, I think this thing would be outstanding.
Just for the hell of it, I filled out my list of top 10 and put, not spoilers, but here's spoiler, but put Dune outside my top 10. Well, that's because I've just spent the last 2 years remembering one thing about the system which I disliked, and also my general stuff, my other things about Dune, which is nothing to do with the role-playing game. So like, right, I felt like I'd watched half a film, so I have a thing against the film's amazing. These are all the good reasons.
That has nothing to do with the game.
I know.
You can't punish Modifius for the filmmaker.
And I feel like everything that they released for Dune is still about Arrakis. And actually, some of the stuff you said reminded me. I remember reading the book and thinking, oh, there's more to Dune than just Arrakis.
Yeah, but not much.
And I remember actually looking and go, there's like so many good things in this game. They're like the fact that you can go from really micro level up to a really macro level and back again and do loads of cool things. And the fact that it is very narrative.
Yeah.
It is a system I could point at to people who go 2D20 is too crunchy and go, Dune isn't.
Oh, yeah.
Go and have a look at Dune. There are no combat dice. Okay. You don't have, it's not super complicated. In fact, it's a narrative system. 2D20 is a crunchy system. Go and look at Dune and go and look at Dishonored. They are not crunchy systems.
Not
in fact,
all.
they are very free flowing and easy. And of course, people wouldn't believe you because they haven't tried it.
As mechanics, but not necessarily as narrative vehicles. Like I said, I think Dune is really challenging.
I think one of the problems with Dune is that in trying to make the rules a bit more narrative, those little subsystems, one in particular, the dueling rules, are so badly explained, it's unplayable. But that's the funny thing, isn't it? When you don't actually have a good look at something again, you focus on that one thing. So I focused on the film and the property and the dueling rules. Yeah, I think I need to add Dune to my list, actually, of games to play next year, because the film's out in March, and after the film comes out, I will have a film. I will have two films.
You'll have some interest.
It will have an ending, and there will be more Zendaya in it. And so I'd probably be more into Dune. And I get Scott and Brian are massive Dune fans, and they'd be like, yes, we'll play it. So
okay. That all makes sense. I get that. And I appreciate your humility in recognizing that you're mapping your frustration with the movie onto the game, that they're separate entities. I appreciate that. What's your number 3? What do you put?
My number 3, you've already said, it's Fallout. For everything you said, but then I have played Fallout, the video games, more recently, and it did an amazing job of capturing that. The fact that they dumped all their normal stats, and in Fallout you famously have your stats are spell out the letter special, and they had that. You had special, and in Fallout when you level up you gain perks, and the same thing again, you gain perks in the game. So the actual character creation in the role-playing game matched the character creation from the more recent Fallout computer games, but still fitted 2D20, which I think is amazing. Really. It's literally like, that is so impressive. And it works. It's not like they tried to shoehorn Fallout, the role-playing game, into 2D20. It actually worked really well in 2D20. As you've already said, the rules for, like, well, you said modding and wet gears, but the rules for scavenging are really cool. Like, it's built to, when we played Fallout, literally all I had to do as the GM was pick a real-world location, so I had distances.
Yeah.
And I did. I literally picked a point in some mountain, well, hills probably, on the outskirts of San Francisco. And then I just printed real world maps.
Yeah.
And so everywhere they were walking was real world places that I had the maps for. And I could map out buildings and go, this building is either not there or it's destroyed. And then that was ruins that they could investigate. And I could use, pictures of this is what it looks like now. So imagine it's a bit ruined. Because the system just let me do that. I didn't have to. I've criticized a lot of 2D20 games for not being very clear. What do you do as a player?
Right.
What kind
What's
of
your day-to-day activity?
Yeah.
Fallout is obvious as it can be.
Yeah. And Fallout let me just play a sandbox world where, there's going to be people in there you're going to come across. And you're going to, just go on there. And as they went along, they met a guy who gave them a little quest. I mean, I literally played it like the role-playing, the video games, and it worked easily.
That's what I mean. In reading, I have the starter box and I have the core rule book, and in reading those and working through, like, kind of doing a demo run of sorts of the adventure mini campaign, whatever you want to call it, that's in the starter box. Yeah, it just, as you're fond of saying, it just works. And it is so serendipitous that it just fits that system, the bones of the system fit the needs and the I don't know, call them the tropes of the property itself. Yeah. It just fits perfectly. And it's not, and it is a more, it has more fiddly bits than, say, Star Trek Adventures, but it's not so crunchy that it's cumbersome. I don't think any of the games are, but it's definitely not. So yeah, I could totally see where you'd put Fallout right there.
Yeah. I mean, we had a lot of fun playing it, and it would have been easy. It's very easy to play as short sessions, or you could have played it as a crazy long campaign.
Yeah.
I think it'd be very easy to do that. And if some of the others, it's like, well, I'm not really sure what they should be doing. And I'd like more, like those things they have in Star Trek, those 1-page missions. Some of the other settings could do with those, the mission brief things. Fallout, because they give you the rules right out of the start for basically scavenging.
Yep.
I don't need that. So Fallout. Well done. Really good job with Fallout. What's your number 3 then?
Conan. Sadly out of print. But now Conan, if you're not familiar with it, if you're more of an Achtung Cthulhu or Star Trek Adventures player, is obviously same core mechanic. Conan just hangs a lot more crunch, a lot more options onto the core mechanic. There's a longer skill list. There are some additional types of attacks and things. There's the whole sorcery system. There are a lot of other pieces and parts, like moving gearboxes and pieces of like the overall engine components. So it is definitely crunchier. I think Conan, it was outstanding in terms of the lore and the setting offerings, rather, all the books. And not just the books like the Conan Conan the Thief or Conan the Barbarian or Conan whatever that looked at that sliver of Howard's Conan stories, but other books like the what is it, Ancient Ruins and is
Yeah, I
it
mean, I'll jump
Nameless
in on this
Cults? There's a whole
now
bunch
as
of
well.
other
Yeah,
content for the game that if you don't know a lot about Howard's world of Conan, you will.
yeah,
Whether you have only a few of these books or you find a bunch of them, obviously nowadays on the secondary market, because it's not in print anymore, Modiphius can't sell it, not even the electronic copies. But it's an excellent game. I think it's an excellent game that models the property in both the lore, the story, the look, the feel, the presentation, but also mechanically. I think when you have a gritty combat related setting, you need to have some more moving parts and fiddly bits in that combat system, and Conan does an excellent job of that. It's one of those games that I have a big old chunk of a shelf that's just Conan hardbacks, and I look at that. I'm like, one day we shall meet. One day.
Conan's my number 2, so I'm going to go straight into talking about now. Conan is excellent. The series it was a very clever idea. I mean, obviously they essentially decided all of the Conan books up front. Now that's not entirely true. They then added sort of a long campaign thing afterwards. You know, at the Kickstarter we had all this whole series of Conan the books, which were great because they gave you a bunch of extra sort of archetypes used in your character creation. Some of them gave you extra subsystems. Then they gave you some parts of the world. Yeah. Then they gave you a background of when Conan was that kind of person. They gave the GM things for if you want to run a thief campaign or a pirate campaign or a mercenary campaign. How do you do that? So those books are great. But like you said, the other stuff they gave you is a bunch more things. We had an adventure book. They did throw in some campaigns afterwards. Yep. And then they did do some more left field ones. Like I've run Conan Exiles, which is similar to Fallout and the idea of your scavenging. And it was great. We spent a couple of weeks doing that. It was really, really good fun of just the building you're going out and finding resources on kind of a hex. Well, you didn't have to as a hex. We just did it on a square grid.
Right.
Finding things and using those things to build something else, kind of like you do in, Kingmaker or Ultimate Campaign, that kind of idea. And, that was really good fun. So again, Conan was really good because you could use it different ways. And there was enough stuff. And admittedly, but when I look at, my top 2, it's unfair, but I'm not going to ignore my top 2. But I'm comparing Conan, where I kickstarted it and I basically didn't do anything until I had like 5 or 6 books. And then I compare that to like, a Dishonored where it has 1 book.
Yeah.
And that's not really a fair comparison, but at the same time, but that's what I have. I have a bunch of stuff for Conan, and some of these other properties, well, they didn't put a lot in it.
Yeah.
So that's, it's not my fault that it's not a fair comparison.
Yeah, true. I think
Conan's great.
If you're interested in a grittier, like kind of, maybe for lack of a word, nastier, less forgiving in the story, but your character's still tough. Your characters are tough. So your characters can wade into like a sea of, Picts or whatever. But the story is a grittier, less forgiving. It's not sunny and happy where, it's like an anime. It ends up and someone's like this at the end. I was a peace sign. You couldn't see that on anyway. It doesn't end up. It's not like cute and funny. It's like no, the village got burned down and everyone was killed. If that's the kind of, if you want to run a fantasy game like that, I mean, the wonderful thing about if you can find the core book is basically the PHB, the DMG, and an abbreviated monster manual in one single book. So if you can find that thing on the secondary market, you're good to go.
Yeah. So the only thing the core book it doesn't have as much of the setting as some of the other all the other books.
It's bigger picture. The other ones go more in depth.
Rules wise, it has the stuff that they add in the other systems you don't need. It has plenty of monsters and it has all the character creation and rules you need to play it, and like the displays, which are the how you kill someone and then you hold their head up and go, look what I have done.
Their minions away. Yeah.
I was going to say that one of the things about the combat is it is helpful to have characters that are useful in combat. But actually, if you have ones that aren't good, like in melee, if they're good at talking, you can use you can intimidate or you can persuade people and damage them. I mean, it works as damage, But you have to then think, well, it's being abstracted. You're reducing someone's morale, or you're trying to persuade them. So you
That's a good
can do
point.
things that way. So
That's a
then
good
you don't.
point. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say you go.
I was going to say that's a good point. That Conan is a gritty, action heavy setting. However, action doesn't only mean punching and slashing and shooting. You're right. The that side of it, and then the nastiness of sorcery. Yeah. So if you can find Conan on the secondary market, you can find it used somewhere, I would pick it up.
It's a perfect example in the original couple of things, and they don't really talk about it as much later on. Well, later on, they combined all the health together. If you wanted to persuade someone mid-combat in a 5e game, your GM probably wouldn't. Oh, we're in combat now.
Yeah, the difficulty would be too high. They're pissed off at you. The difficulty is plus 10
you can't do it. So you'd have to have a spell or have a bard that has a special ability that lets you do it. There's nothing stopping you doing in the middle of most 2D20 games, a mental attack. It's not, I'm phrasing it like that because that's how the game treats it. But really you are intimidating or trying to persuade or deceive someone or something that's, maybe is going to harm someone. They run away or they turn on their friend or whatever else. Yeah. And you don't need a special ability to do that. It's just standard. It's just baked in.
Yep. And you can shape your character differently over time to be better at different kinds of ways of handling that. But yeah, it's not one of those things that like, well, sorry, you're not the bard. You're never going to be persuasive like that. So don't even try. You'd be an idiot to dump points or buy a feat like that. So don't do it. So that was your number two, correct?
Yeah, that was my number two.
That was mine. Your number two.
Your number two
is Star Trek Adventures.
And all of our listeners just died. Shock.
No. Honestly, I didn't. I mean, I recognize that this is all made up, so I didn't really. I didn't struggle over this too much, but I really did. I really put a lot of thought into 1 and 2, and honestly, one day I could flip flop these two.
I was amazed that this wasn't number one.
But no, but I'll tell you why I decided number 1 as number 1. But I put Star Trek Adventures as a very close number 2. Because it models the property so well. It models it enables.
That's why it should be number 1.
Well, I know, but it's so close anyway. And I have a reason. But it models I have never played a Star Trek game that models the property so well. In fact, I have never played a game that models an existing property so effectively, so consistently with experienced or novice players across the board. Anyone who knows anything about Star Trek is able to jump in and it feels like Star Trek and it runs like Star Trek. And the mass of books that they've put out have been excellent. I don't like Discovery, but the Discovery Guide is great. You just
it's ironic because I don't like the Discovery Guide. And
I know, I remember that. But I think that the melding of the system of the story and the setting, as we talk about, I think that Star Trek Adventures just nails it on all of those. And again, go ahead.
The extra stuff they're putting out now, like the fact that we got the Lower Decks book, which could have been about comedy role playing, but it actually has lots of good stuff about, well, let's imagine you're not the bridge crew. What does that look like? That's really good. And Captain's Log. I can't, Captain's Log is just worth getting.
Yeah,
it is so good. It's such a good book. We've said it repeatedly. It's not just for playing solo.
Right.
You could easily just have that as an extra helper for a GM to give you extra advice, and then ignore the changes and the tweaks in the system. Or you could use it to play a simplified version of Star Trek, particularly in ship combat.
Yeah.
There's so much good stuff in that book. So it's nice that where they could be running out of ideas, clearly they're not.
No, for that one, and not to say that in other lines they're not, but Star Trek it just keeps going. So yeah, system setting and story, the balance between those is almost perfect.
Yeah.
Almost perfect. So yeah, it's such a close. And like I said, if you caught up with me next week, I would probably have these two flip-flopped. What is your number 1 though?
I can't believe you didn't get it. This is the one I bang on about by far.
I know.
Most. And I asked Jeremy, and he's like, Star Trek. And I'm like, no. And he's like, Cthulhu. I was like, I don't even play it. Infinity is my number 1 by an absolute mile. Infinity is what got me into 2D20.
Okay.
I didn't start with Mutant Chronicle. I started when I saw the Kickstarter for Infinity. And Infinity, bear in mind, Infinity is a miniatures game. So this isn't a case of Fallout. You have a bunch of big computer games with loads of lore. This is not Act of Cthulhu, which has a whole previous line. This isn't Dune or Star Trek or John Carter, where it's a big literary property and there's tons of stuff there. This is based on a miniatures game where there is some background in those books.
Yes.
But it's an excuse to put little metal miniatures, which are really hard to build, on a table against other little metal miniatures and move them around a bit and shoot at each other. And they did an amazing job of making this sort of transhuman cyberpunk sci-fi, which has lots of different, people don't realize all the stuff in the Infinity setting.
The breadth of the setting it's huge.
Yeah. If you are interested in transhuman sci-fi, it does that. If you're interested in cyberpunk, I've seen people for some reason on Reddit in the last few weeks, about 5 different people going, "Can you recommend me a cyberpunk game?" And people are now joking about how many people have asked this question. And just read the other posts. But people have said, Infinity 2D20, it can straight up do cyberpunk. And you can play it very military, or you can play it from a corporate point of view, or you can play it. The part of the reason I really got into it, and I played this with Scott and Brian, we absolutely loved it. Firstly, it was the first 2D20 we were used to. So it was the first time we'd seen, it's called heat in there, but not threat. It's the first time we'd seen momentum. Yeah. So the system was a really good thing. Hacking was complicated. Once you got your head around it, the hacking worked really well. Like if you had a hacker in your group, they could do what you're meant to be able to do in the hack games, where the hacker will turn off the enemy's guns, and the guns they're like, my guns don't work. And then you just take them out in seconds. So the hacking things could do good stuff. The rules for, now they call it Psy-War, but it's really just talking to people and intimidate. And like I've already said about Conan, that stuff's really good. But the campaigns were set up with this idea, the wilderness of mirrors, where every time you run a session, you would give different players different objectives, because the standard way of running it is the characters will have different backgrounds and they come from different factions. So like Scott was from, he was raised as a corporate, but he's also part of this faction. And Brian's character is, I'm guessing, because I can't remember, maybe he's a criminal, but he comes from this particular faction. And I give them these little slips of paper where, as they go through the mission, because I've used the written mission books, they have extra objectives they have to accomplish, but they're secret objectives. And even though I've only got 2 players, it always that little bit of edge, that little extra bit of edge in every adventure, which made it more interesting, because they were both always trying to do these things. And why are you going into that room? No reason. Well, why are you? No. And so it always made it. We had so much fun playing Infinity, to the point when the last time we played it was because essentially I ended up pitting them against each other. That there was a guy putting a bomb, and one of them wanted the bomb to go off, and the other one wanted to stop it. I can't remember why, but. And the characters died, but because they get backed up, if we go back to it, and I think we will, because Brian rated this very highly on my list of things to play.
You could just go back to it and have them dumped into another body.
Yes, or we could carry on. Like I said, I've mentioned this a bunch of times in the podcast. Brian's character did die in character creation, a la Traveler, but then he started in a second body.
Yeah.
So we had so much fun playing Infinity, but again, it does exactly what we've said in a lot of the other properties. It does a really good job. All the cool, crazy stuff you want to do in the properties. There's like werewolves and cyborgs and robots and all kinds of. It can do all that stuff because the rules let you do it. It is on the crunchier end. It is like Conan. You have
it's the last one standing, actually, from that original batch. Yeah, it's the last.
Because they still have the license. They keep saying they might make new stuff. It's kind of suffered from the fact that it released under Kickstarter. So if you back the Kickstarter and got everything like I did, I got all the books. So I've not spent any money on Infinity since the Kickstarter because
they haven't put anything into it, it seems, since then either.
But if they maybe, if there was books they never released, and they have hinted that, well, maybe they will. Or they could actually bring the setting up to date, because literally between them doing the Kickstarter and then releasing the books, there was massive changes in the setting.
Yep.
So I'd love them to release some new stuff, and I would be all over it. I think it's great. It's a genuinely really, really interesting setting, and the system does a great job running it.
The thing that I found about it, and I have the core book, and I have like Ships of the Humans, but I have a book of ships. I agree completely that when you have the technology of that type, like cyberpunk, if there's cyberware, if there's those kinds of things, that kind of if that kind of stuff is prominent in the sci-fi, I think the rules need to be a little crunchier than say Star Trek Adventures.
Yes.
And yeah, it does a nice job. And I love the fact too that it is the oldest version of the system that still exists, that's still supported to some degree or another. And I mean, again, if you're coming to this from, you've only played Star Trek Adventures, you've only played Octo Cthulhu or something like that, the newer iterations, I think it'd be worth going back and looking. If you're already comfortable with Star Trek Adventures or something like Octo Cthulhu, like toward the middle of the crunchometer scale, you already understand the core system, how it works. Yeah, there you go. Adding more options and things like Conan and Infinity would require of you would be easy. It'd be actually a lot easier to go a little crunchier than to go just jump into the crunchier one without knowing anything about the system. So that is your number one. That actually does not surprise me one bit. Now that I put like an iota of thought into it, that does not surprise me at all.
It's because it wasn't on your list, but you haven't run it or
I have neither run it nor played it. I have read it, and not that much.
On your list. Yeah.
Here's my number one. It's Achtung Cthulhu, and here's why. Okay, it is the most middle of the road iteration of the system.
Yeah,
I think it's a little crunchier than Star Trek Adventures,
literally,
but not by much. And I mean, who doesn't like World War II as a topic, But again, I think that it's like Star Trek Adventures. The setting and the story and the system are a perfect match. What edged out Star Trek Adventures in favor of Achtung Cthulhu for me, here it comes. No, it's not that. It's not that I've made some money off of Achtung Cthulhu stuff. It's not that. I'd have put Eris on here if no. Honestly, it's this. Is that I think that if you strip 2D20 down to its bare bones with the meta currencies and with the stress mechanic and the fact that characters are in most cases pretty tough, they're pretty resilient. Yeah. The thing that I don't think 2D20 does this best necessarily, like it means other modes of play are at a detriment, but I think that 2D20 does pulp high action easiest.
Yeah.
So if you meet with 2D20 at the lowest hanging fruit of it being of a great system, it's swinging from chandeliers pulp action, and that's Achtung Cthulhu. Yeah. So that's why it edged out Star Trek Adventures by a smidge, by like the diameter of a single like shell casing. That's what it did, because of that. But I mean, it's well supported. It's really easy to think of stories and ideas and places and events and interesting real world characters because it's based on real world, and it's really easy to find pictures and maps and things like that. And it also, I think that both Star Trek Adventures and Achtung Cthulhu are great for short story arcs, like a single episode that's a few sessions, or potentially a longer campaign. I think both of them work well with that. But yeah, like I said, talk to me next week. I'd probably put Star Trek Adventures on top.
I think my preference for Star Trek, part of that I played it more. I think initially when I looked at the books, or when we first kind of made the comparisons, there was more stuff for Star Trek that I could running at Cthulhu is easy to run something, but running something good I find easier in Star Trek because I have a knowledge of all of these episodes.
Sure.
At Cthulhu, other than the idea of take a Cthulhu thing and put it, too many of my games when there's a cultist. The cultists are trying to raise a Cthulhu monster. You're trying to stop them. I think now if I was going to run Cthulhu, I wouldn't make my own adventure. There's so many pre-written ones, including yours, but there's a whole bunch of stuff I don't have to go and I could just go and get it, relatively cheaply off drive-thru, one of the ones they've released. And haven't they done mission brief type things for Cthulhu?
They have not done mission briefs, but they have done
short style things.
Yeah, they've started these ones where it's I forget what they call it, but it's like a location and it's some story lead-ins and some story lead-outs for an interesting location. But yeah, Modifius has already published 10, 12, a lot of short, like 3 or 4 session, 2 or 3 session, even 1 session adventures that you can get as PDFs. And then they've published several campaign books and have some more coming. So you're right. You wouldn't need to write, if you didn't want to, stuff for Achtung Cthulhu. But
I think that's the thing. That's the problem I have with Act Cthulhu is I remember reading the books thinking, I could come up with really basic encounters, but come up with a really good story that hung together well.
For a while,
I
yeah.
think I would struggle with that. But now it's been out long enough now that there is more stuff. Yeah, there's more stuff to do.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, there are 3 full campaign books out that have, that would take you months to run through. And then there are those short PDF adventures, and they're coming out with a starter box, and they're coming out with a D-Day book next year. So yeah, it's well supported, and the stuff they've supported, the stuff that they put out for adventure material is varied.
Yeah. I mean, the thing, we've said it so many times about Cthulhu. Act Cthulhu is the best written version of the 2D20 system. Yeah. It's not just because it falls in the middle of our spectrum, which coincidentally it does. It just is. It's very clear. It's very well written.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that the SRD toes very closely to Act Cthulhu, because that's the middle. And what's funny is since then we've seen it go in. We have seen, damn it, the more narrative end, which are very Dishonored and Dune are very different beasts from Act Cthulhu. Yeah. And then Fallout was again. Should we do quick mentions to the other ones?
I'm sticking with top 5. I wanted to stick with what we did, but we did have an honorable mention that both.
Before
of
we
us
get to the honorable mention, I just want to deal with the pretty much everything else that is not in my top 5 is basically because I haven't played them. I have played or run. Well, I haven't played. I have run everything in my top 5. So, but I mean, it's not like I think the other ones are bad. The one I'd really like to try, I really want to try Dreams and Machines. They seem to have done some cool things with the setting.
The system as well.
Yeah, I meant system. I didn't mean setting. I need to read the books, the setting. I don't have the core books, so I need to get them. But anyway, the idea it's a funny story, but I'll go. And really, I should say this when we do Dreams Machines.
But you know what? Wait, let's be disciplined and let's do that then.
I'm going to forget it when we get it. No, go on, do your honorable mention then. But I want to try Dreams Machines.
Honorable mentions the SRD.
Yeah,
because you can do anything with it.
You can, and you have.
And as we've said, it's not just a single presentation of the rules. It is a single presentation of the rules with a whole bunch of options and explanations and ideas attached to it. So you can do anything with the SRD. Yeah. But since it is not a freestanding setting of its own in a single committed system, we cannot count it as a game.
No, I mean, the SRD they did a very good job. The basic, if you just took all the standard rules as given SRD, you're towing very close to Star Trek and, well, pretty close to Star Trek now, because I think you only have 6 skills, don't you?
Yeah, I think it sits between those two.
Yeah.
Star Trek and
But if you want to dial the crunch up to create something like Infinity or Mutant Chronicles, you can.
It's all there.
It's there to let you do that. Make a super crunchy version and have hit locations. And I can't remember if they put in Mutant Chronicles. There are people they've only seen Mutant Chronicles being put off 2D20. They think every version of 2D20 is the same. Yeah, Mutant Chronicles doesn't have a health track. It has a health track for each body location.
Yeah, it's such a different animal.
It's just I mean, I've seen people complain, oh, well, Fallout has hit locations. Fallout only has hit locations to see what armor's there. It's a roll to go, well, your armor's either 0, 1, or 2. That's not difficult.
Yeah.
It's not like you're rolling to see what, different Infinity and Conan, same. You only roll to see what armor is that location. And you can just roll the critical hit dice with, the hit location dice with your attack. So it's 0 effort. Mutant Chronicles, that is not the case.
Yeah. But we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. If you want that crunch, you can.
Yeah, you can go get that you can use that from the SRD. You don't even need to track down the Mutant Chronicles book.
Do we? I don't think we need to argue about our combined top 5.
No, we're good.
Because with the exception of Dune, which I don't think belongs in a top 5 list, but your Infinity's not in yours because you haven't played it, and Correct. Dune's not in mine because I've decided I don't like it because of the film.
That's fine.
The rest of our top 4 is the same.
Yep, and I think the space between them is negligible.
Yeah.
Overall,
everything that you say why yours is 1 and 2, I agree with you. I just haven't played it as much as you. Sure. And I prefer my 1, 2, and 3 I've had more fun playing those, but I agree with everything you said. So essentially we have our top 5 is pretty much the same.
Yep.
I think to argue where there would be pointless because I'm trying to put a game that you haven't played in our combined top 5.
No point. So if you're listening,
play Infinity.
There you go. Play Infinity. Actually, play any of these, but let us know what you think. If you disagree, if you have experience with one of the other systems that we did not mention, let us know. I'd love to hear perspectives on these, on like John Carter or any of them. I'd love to hear your perspectives on your experiences. So whether you're watching us or listening, leave a comment and let us know what you are thinking. And also remember that there's a link in this, whether it's YouTube or the podcast, to join our Discord. So jump on and let us know what you think there as well.
Yes, let us know why we are wrong, that your favorite version of Shooty 20 is not in our top 5.
Exactly. I like that. That's a good way to end this episode. Tell us why we're wrong.
And then like and subscribe anyway.
Exactly. Thank you, as always, for listening to Fluff and Crunch. You can join our Discord, you can subscribe to the podcast, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, all through the links in the show notes. Thanks again. Have a great day. We look forward to talking with you.